I realized that I haven't done a sit-down video in a very long time, I guess because I have been moving around. But today, I'm obviously all dressed up. I am going out later today, and I thought I would sit down and film a talking video for you guys that I've been meaning to do for quite some time, ever since I got back to Canada. So for those of you who may be new to my channel, I am a full-time travel YouTuber, blogger, but I'm also a Canadian citizen, a Canadian taxpayer, unfortunately, and I just came back from a very long trip abroad, and really I haven't been back in Canada for a long time in the last 4 years. So now that I have been here for quite some time, a lot of things have really stuck out to me. Primarily, of course, no surprise, the cost of living in Canada. But before we get into it, I really do want to say that even with the cost of living crisis, I am a very proud Canadian citizen, and I do think there are so many amazing things about this country. I am forever grateful for all the opportunities that life in Canada has given me, and I do think it is the right choice for certain people under certain circumstances. Let me put it that way. Maybe even including myself. And I guess for the next few months that I'm going to be here, outside of the time that I want to spend with family and friends, I'm also still just researching of whether Canada long term is going to be a good fit for me. So of course, when we are talking about the cost of living crisis in Canada, we are primarily talking about the worst offender, which is real estate. Now, this will really vary depending on the province that you choose to live in, but in 2022, the average price of a detached family home, just your average family 2-3 bedroom house, was hovering around $700,000. Like, yes, that is Canadian dollars. So in US, I think that's about $500,000. But still, in Toronto, if you wanted a house for that price, it would probably be a crack house or a 1-bedroom condo. And actually, speaking of Toronto, you guys know that that is my favorite city in Canada, and that if I was to stay here long term, that's probably where I would ideally want to live. But the thing is that even though now I am more established in my career and making better money, I really don't know if it's worth it to pay the average rent that they currently have in the city. For a 1-bedroom apartment, it is $2,400. I think the primary practical reason of when Toronto would make sense is if you can have a job that pays you a lot more than it would anywhere else. Now, having said all that, I will still stand by my opinion that I've stated many times, that Alberta is by far the best option in Canada as far as what you get as a lifestyle experience, primarily here in Calgary. Amazing, phenomenal, some of the best nature in Canada for the best budget-friendly price. I made a whole video about this last year, and maybe I'll put a card up or something so you guys can check it out for more information. But it really does come down to the fact that Alberta as a province does have a lot to offer. I think there's a lot of different industries that happen here in the province. There are a lot of good jobs to be had. The real estate market isn't quite as crazy as other provinces, so I feel like even here in Calgary, for a large city, it's reasonable. But if you're willing to move out of the city by even 30 minutes to an hour, the prices drop really by like 30 or 40%. In BC and Ontario, you will not have that sort of thing happen, where even if you live in like Brampton or something like that, or Mississauga, the prices are still extremely high. And of course, the other amazing thing about living in Alberta is that you have world-class nature, some of the best nature in Canada, right outside of your doorstep. Vancouver offers that as well, and is, of course, probably the top, beautiful city surrounded by nature, but you are more or less paying double the rent. So depending on where it is you can get a job, I would say that Alberta would be my top pick, but of course we also have Saskatchewan and Manitoba, which would also be quite budget friendly. For those of you who don't know, I did grow up in Saskatchewan from the age of 5 to 18, 19 basically. So I do have a lot of experience living there, both in small town life and then also in Saskatoon. In my opinion, it is the best city to live in Saskatchewan. So yeah, if you are looking for the best budget-friendly area of Canada while still having quite a few job opportunities, I would probably say like western to central Canada of Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba is probably going to be your best bet. Unless you speak French, like they do say that the cost of living is not too bad in Quebec, so if you speak French, maybe that's an option. The Maritimes, not that I've really spent much time there, I hear is having a really bad cost of living crisis, primarily because of the real estate and so many people wanting to move there but just not having anything available and prices just being crazy high. So unless you want to live in a really small town in the Maritimes where it might be less expensive, Maritimes is on the rise as well. And then of course there is the north of Canada, which depends on where you are there, but overall I probably wouldn't recommend moving up there unless you have a job that is really suited to more remote sort of places. You just want to get away from the world. In a way, the cost of living crisis is even worse up there because it costs so much money to fly things up to the more remote parts of Canada. But speaking of transport, that's actually the next thing that I wanted to talk about, because unfortunately it is very hard to live in Canada if you don't have a car. I actually remember that I got my car stolen when I was living in Saskatoon once, and I had a kind of 3-week period where I didn't have a car while the insurance was figuring everything out, and it was terrible. Like, it was terrible. It would take me 4 or 5 times as long to get from work to home, and in the blistering cold winters, I would not recommend. I would say that unless you're living in Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, it is very difficult to live in Canada without a car. So of course every situation is going to be different depending on whether you already own the car or you're making payments, how much gas you use, if you have to pay for parking. But in the statistics that I saw, that if you had a lease and if you were having to pay for monthly city parking and at least a few $100s of gas a month, it is very easy to hit $1,000 a month just for your car. Like, to me, that is madness. Like, that is madness that in a year you could spend $12,000 to just get around. The way I look at it that makes it especially crazy is that usually when I buy plane tickets, they're all one-way tickets, and almost always it's under $1,000. Whether I've flown to Southeast Asia or Europe, I can usually find some kind of deal where, maybe it's around $700 or $800, and that's basically an international one-way flight, once a month. That is just madness to me. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is groceries. That was one of the first things that I noticed when I came back to Canada, and I was doing a grocery run with my mom, and I was just shocked at how much the prices have gone up since the last time I was here. Of course, it will depend on the store you go to. Some are much more budget friendly than others. And just to show you guys what I mean, let me insert some clips that I took of some average grocery items that I found on my last trip. So to put everything that I just touched on into a average sort of number of what it costs to live in Canada, and once again I really want to emphasize it does depend in which part of Canada you want to live. The rent is really what's going to tip it over the edge if you are in a major center. But from the statistics that I could find online, a single person living by themselves in a smaller town or a more inexpensive city, like let's say Saskatoon, the average amount of money that you would have to make to comfortably live there after taxes would be about $3,000. If you had a family, and let's say you're a family of 4, the average estimate that they were saying that you need to live comfortably in Canada is at least $6,000 a month. Now, yes, that's not a super high figure, but when you think about the fact that that is after taxes, and that is also from the amount of money that you want to put away into savings to save for retirement, because pensions definitely are not going to cover the cost of living in Canada for most people. Unless a family does have one really high earner, it is more common in Canada for both parents to work, because otherwise the expenses are just too high. So that is the average sort of reality that we are currently looking at living in Canada right now. Like I said before, I think it can be the right fit depending on what it is you're looking for in a country, what kind of industry you're in, what is the average salary that you make in that position. I have read a lot of articles recently about the disillusionment, so to say, that many immigrants have had, especially in the last 5 to 10 years of moving to Canada and expecting, a certain kind of lifestyle, certain kinds of opportunities, and not being able to find that. A lot of new immigrants have actually returned back to their home countries or have gone, somewhere else. So it is going to be interesting to see how Canada changes in this next decade, and if they are able to expand the economy and the kinds of, work opportunities that we have here. But for me personally, I don't know, it's going to be an interesting few months that I am going to spend here. And like I said before, I am still really trying to play out different scenarios and seeing if Canada long-term is going to be the right fit for me. If I'm being honest, it's unlikely that I would stay here long-term unless there's opportunities specifically in Canada that are bringing me more money. And to be honest, that is possible. Like I said, Toronto does have a lot of opportunities, and that is why I will be going there in the start of August. Of course, I want to visit all my friends that live there, but also I want to do some networking and just do some digging around of what kind of opportunities might be available to me if I was to spend some more time there. So I am excited to be here, and I hope this video wasn't too much of a downer. I know we were talking about how expensive everything is, but like I swear there's so many positive things to Canada that I didn't really touch on. But I did just want to be honest with you guys that there is definitely such a difference coming back here, even just a year, later from how things were last year. And I really hope that that trend will not continue, that inflation doesn't keep just going up and up. And as much as it will hurt some people, I think that the real estate bubble has to pop here in Canada. Like, it can't keep going the way it is. Like, it's just on an insane level right now. But yeah, that is where I'm going to end it, guys. I have somewhere to be, so I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and as always, I am sending you so much love. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and keep being your own kind of beautiful. Bye, guys.